The Civilization 7 devs heard us decry, "This is too vague," with their recent update teaser for the September, maybe come October patch, and decided instead to flood the zone with updates that were anything but light on detail. It seems the new maps will actually be meaningfully new, to Civilization 7 at least. And that UI that everybody loves to hate, well, it's also getting a city-level upgrade for readability and usability. And if that wasn't enough, real detail on the new leader and civilizations arriving in the Right to Rule collection. Let's take a look. Let's begin with the new maps. As we discussed last time, the maps in this game tend to be fairly generic. Start with a blob or two, the central continents or two. Add a few extras around the outside, and carve out a little bit here and there to try and make the map feel unique. They've already teased that new types are coming, continents and islands, and Pangea and islands. But that really isn't enough to get me excited, right? Thankfully, the new detail is that they're also introducing an entirely new technique for these maps called Voronoi map generation. They say this completely changes how they're approaching map gen. Previously, fractal noise had been used to create the maps. It works well when it's applied uniformly across the whole map, but it can be hard to steer it towards the specific needs of specific gameplay. However, in this new map type structure, it's a little easier and a little bit more organic. Rather than hear my probably fairly garbled explanation, I'll show you the nice little GIF graphic that they included in the developer diary, where they also give a little bit of detail about what you're actually looking at here. In essence, fire a whole load of points at the map. These points become cells. Cells act a little bit like seeds for tectonic plates in this version of Earth, and they grow out and connect to one another using a series of rules that mean that the landforms should be somewhat logical and make sense, rather than just, one-off tiles of land all over the place. There is a sort of a set of common rules that can be followed to produce a map. These rules will vary based on the type of map you're playing, and also they'll influence the kind of things that will happen. Tiles avoiding poles, preferring certain latitudes or elevations. You get the idea. With a few more GIFs to look at, what does this actually mean though, right? How does this actually come together? What are they promising? Well, they say that the result of this new map generation is that the new maps will be far more varied and look more natural. Things that were impossible before can now appear regularly. Homelands and distant lands, for example, may be north and south of one another instead of just left and right, west and east every time. Continents may be connected by a tiny border or a large border. There may be a whole chain of islands or none in between. The crucial thing here that really needs to be delivered is a feeling of randomness, of excitement, of exploration that can really be improved based on the current version of Civ 7 anyway. They say in the diary that the settings have been tuned to generate quote-unquote normal maps, natural feeling maps for standard gameplay about 95% of the time, but there is a 5% chance, so 1 in 20, that you'll just get a totally quote-unquote super weird end quote layout that's quite bizarre. This is the RNG that we need. I'd love, by the way, an option to be able to turn that 1 in 20 chance up. Give me a totally random map if I want it. Or maybe within some reason. Ultimately, this looks like a good step for Civilization, a new method for generating its maps that should be more random, should be more interesting, and, dare I say it, a little bit more closely aligned to Civilization maps of the past. Now, on to the UI, user experience improvements coming in update 1.2.5, specifically about settlements. They say, really, there were 3 goals. They wanted to improve 3 player questions. The answers to those, anyway. What should I build? Where do I place constructibles? And finally, should I go for an improvement or a specialist? Let's take a physical look, at how the UI is changing in each of these categories. On the production menu for a city, they say that the current version displays a predictive yield presentation. unfortunately, they found that that doesn't actually reflect what players are experiencing. The yields are often confusing, and it leads to a bit of a lack of engagement where you just place stuff anywhere. They say the main problem, and what they're trying to address, is that yields were acting as a recommender without actually being one. And they wanted to highlight other things, which is what they've tried to do here by highlighting 1. Warehouse improvements. The number of improvements in a settlement that will benefit from a warehouse effect. And secondly, the highest adjacency tile. The most adjacencies that a building currently has available in the settlement. They've also tried to improve the clarity and readability of the tooltips, and you'll see from these before and after photos that we're obviously going to look at quite closely through this section, how these changes play out. My honest take from sort of early days here looking at this is that it probably looks better, but also largely says the same thing. The addition of the warehouse, the counting of the warehouse improvements is nice. Everything else here looks mostly the same though. The other main change that stands out are what they call the context tags, things like building, wonder, ageless, etc. Those have clearly been changed here too, alongside the move towards a bulleted list. What about problem number 2? Building placement. I've got a building, where do I put it down? Well, hilariously, in an update about UI, the before and after labels have now moved to the bottom of these images. But hey, nonetheless, here they are highlighting 3 changes. There are new yield indicators, green and red up or down arrows to show you your gains and losses. Secondly, there's a revamped building slot icon, replacing the old blue dot with something more legible. And finally, green yield numbers on tiles, with the highest net yields or highest primary yield highlighted for consideration. And so you can see the new tooltips. Again, I'm not massively sold, but it probably works. You can see the arrows showing the player is losing happiness and largely just gaining a whole load of money, and the color coding of the tiles. Not actually meant to represent advisor hint, by the way, but more meant to show you perhaps a logical place where you could flow to next, rather than necessarily the best place moving forward. In-game, they say that the left-hand panel will dynamically update as you hover over different tiles, which is, of course, very nice. And, as we've seen in some of the extra screenshots that they've showed, there's a difference. Simplified and detailed yields going on here. This optional, expandable show yield details reveals a whole lot more about what's going on in the tile. Nice to see options like that, as well as some small changes to the UI around the adjacency bonuses here too. The final area that they've decided to tackle are growth events. So will you choose to expand out and get a new rural tile, or will you choose to add a specialist to an existing, likely built-up urban tile? Here again, they've tried to break things down just a little bit more clearer around the yield icons, what's increasing, what's decreasing, again with simplified or detailed build-outs. And lastly, in the third and final main section of this video, let's talk about the 1 new leader and 2 new civilizations that have now been revealed in the Right to Rule DLC collection, right? This is the tail end of this DLC, due to release in September, maybe October New Zealand time, given the date at the time of recording this video. Nonetheless, the leader, Lakshmi Bai, is a fascinating one. Essentially, a diplomatic militarist, all about influence. This ruler gains increased influence towards initiating the city-state incorporate action. So if you want to take over the city-state, you'll receive extra influence for doing so. More importantly though, you'll also gain control of the city-state's units. All of their units when you incorporate them. So kind of like levying 1 unit, but you get them all. Nice. And as an extra little buff to your influence generation, when one of your land-based military units defeats an enemy, you'll gain influence equal to that enemy unit's combat strength, equal to a percentage of its combat strength anyway. Coming to Civilization VII's Antiquity Age, we have one of 3 ancient Korean kingdoms called Silla. Silla's unique ability allows it to receive increased culture on its resources. Nice! And they are overall an economic and diplomatic civilization. They have a unique civilian unit that's a merchant that will give you extra money based on your relationship with your trading partner, and their unique military unit is a ranged unit with increased movement and attack range. It counts as a cavalry, and it has increased bombard strength relative to the unit it replaces. Honestly, sounds like a cool one. Obviously, we also haven't seen the gameplay for it here. They just released some generic Civ reveals for both of these two. You will have seen them playing throughout the video. They look pretty cool, I've got to say. Both of them, actually, look pretty cool. Speaking of both of them, the second civilization, the Qajar civilization, arrives to the modern age in Civ 7. It's a diplomatic expansionist, and it fits together pretty well with the rest of the theme. Their unique ability, their crown, increases their influence towards supporting diplomatic actions. Both civs, of course, have unique infrastructure, quarters, buildings. I won't delve into them too much because the descriptions in the civ guides are pretty generic. It just says which yield it increases, and you can probably guess with these civs it tends to be things like influence, culture, happiness, and gold. The two unique units for Qajar are quite interesting though. Their civilian unit is actually a commander with extra movement who can raise a set number of additional districts per turn. Nice! And that's quite a civilian, and that combines with their military unit, a unique cavalry with increased combat strength and HP healing in command radius of the unique commander. Very cool, very synergetic. I'm looking forward to playing with these guys when the patch rolls out in just a couple of days' time at the time of recording. And speaking of time, I really don't like to waste yours, so I'm going to wrap up this video here. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.